right. Thank you everyone for joining us for our final panel at the Mobile Growth Summit today in the mobile marketing track. We are so fortunate to have such an amazing group of women, and we will have one man joining us for this last panel, which is all about Ask Me Anything, right? So it's a Mobile Masters, Ask Me Anything. Kim Carlson will be running this. She's VP of Sales at Aarki, which is one of our sponsors, and hopefully you had some time to go visit Aarki in their booth today. And I'm going to hand it over to her. If you have questions, please, please, please ask them throughout this session. We will be taking live questions. Just enter them right into your view of the platform. And I will hand them over to Kim. So Kim, I'm going to let you do this.
Yeah. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much. Hey, everyone. Great to be here one more time with a virtual event. We're getting used to this. I appreciate everyone joining. It's fun to talk to fellow folks in the ecosystem. So my name is Kim Carlson. Yes, I run sales for Aarki for the US and EMEA. And Aarki is a mobile DSP. We help apps and brands efficiently drive new users and retarget users as well across the globe. I've been in the mobile space for about 10 years, and things have changed. We're up for a really interesting 2021 for sure. So with that said, I'm happy to moderate the panel. This is all about learning. So I would like, everyone, please ask questions as we go. We have some questions, but it's really good to hear from folks in the audience too, and keep it very dynamic. And it is an Ask Me Anything. We have a broad panel, folks, with some very, differing backgrounds, which is great. So we may have one person coming in late. The CEO of Zedge, it's Jonathan, and he may in fact be a few minutes late on his phone, but we'll welcome him as he comes in. But let's get started with Gozi and Eugenia. Gozi, do you want to go first and just give the group a understanding of your role, your background, the company you're currently with, and what your focus is?
Thanks, Kim. Glad to be here. I am Gozi Abona. I lead growth marketing for the Overtime app. And Overtime is a sports media brand that wants to serve the next generation of sports fans. So from original content on platforms like Snapchat, YouTube, to organic channels, social media channels, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, as well as the lifestyle arm, apparel, and the Overtime app. And my function is leading the marketing strategy, full funnel for the Overtime app.
Great, thank you so much. And Eugenia, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Eugenia. I joined Earnin actually about a month ago to lead growth, focused on product-led growth, acquisition, and lifecycle. And a little bit about Earnin. Earnin is a community-based fintech company. In its core, we believe that the current financial system works against 150 million underserved Americans who literally, believe it or not, just live paycheck to paycheck. We give access to their earned but unpaid money, all free of charge, and community members pay forward by giving tips to support this service for everyone. So I'm really excited about this role that I just started. And previously I led growth at Smule, a social singing platform, pretty much also very community driven, but through music lens. Excited to talk to you all today.
Terrific, thank you. So let's see, we'll go ahead and proceed because if Jonathan comes in, we will welcome him at that time. So let's get started with some questions. I've listened to a lot of panels. I was listening to several in the last couple of weeks. I know this question gets asked a lot, but everybody's perspective is different and interesting. Not only are we facing 2021 changes with the mobile ecosystem, with Apple's announcement and upcoming changes, but certainly the pandemic has changed a lot. Eugenia has an interesting background with having just come from one app and then into another. And Gozi, I know you've got some perspective too in your past experience, but how has it changed advertising? How has it changed mobile, the pandemic? Are there temporary changes or are there some permanent changes? I'll kick off kind of my answer to this quickly is I was listening to a really fabulous panel this week, and that, are we in the heyday of mobile now? Because so many people are stuck at home. Things have certainly accelerated with mobile, and what does that mean, right? How has the pandemic changed it? And then are we at the heyday, and will things change going forward? So I'll let you to jump in where you see fit.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, it's funny. I really have a like two companies perspective right now. And overall, I think what I've seen is at the beginning, like so many people came online, right? Like there was just like everyone was online. And then there was a dip and hangover. Nobody wanted to be online, although we still were in the midst of pandemic. And now kind of we're in a new baseline, which is higher than, pre-pandemic in terms of like demand and being online. And, like just from behavior standpoint, what I observed, at SMU before pandemic, we already observed a trend, people seeking those like virtual, meaningful relationship online. And we've seen that through pandemic, actually that accelerated, and our goals on the growth were how we can reduce the barriers of more casual creators, like because we saw so many of those all of a sudden willing to put themselves out there. So that's like on SMU side. With earning, what we've seen, especially towards the midst of the pandemic, that actually more people need our services, and in need. And those, stimulus checks just don't help, and there is a continuous increased demand from our community. So from that perspective, if we have increased online availability, generally, I would say this year, we haven't seen as many like CPI, CPA increase as like usually year over year what we see. Personally, from my perspective, that usually each year, your CPA will go up, but now because of more availability, people online, but also potentially some companies advertise less, there was no that acceleration of CPA.
So you didn't see the same sort of pressure in the market on CPI?
Yeah. Because usually, like I assume, like forecasts always like, each year, there's more and more increase. And this year, well, first, the trends were all over the place, for sure, right? But all in all, right now it's a little cheaper to acquire users.
Okay.
Of course, that will change with iOS 14.
Yes, right.
And last year, towards the beginning of the quarantine, we saw a lot of companies pull back in terms of their budgets and acquisition. Some categories excelled and leaned in, but for the most part, people were, kind of pulling back and assessing, their tech stacks and businesses. Did they have the right stack, the right, softwares, partner platforms, tactics and strategies. And I think that was helpful for them to take a look at, because for the most part, a lot of it was put off, and having that time to kind of reassess where they are, I think was helpful for a lot of businesses, as well as, the focus on engagement and retention. Like Eugenia mentioned, I saw a lot of, messaging around just value, helping people to navigate the current circumstances, whether it was, adapting to, contactless delivery or curbside pickups, being a resource of how to stay safe during the circumstances, or where to find information. And so I think now, folks are starting to get the budgets back, and you see a lot more, spend in the ecosystem. And I'm very sure that the CPMs and the rates will surely rise again.
Interesting. Yeah, there were certain categories that were leaning in. Gaming was one for sure in 2020, with folks finding themselves at home a whole lot more. We definitely saw that at Aarki. But it is interesting, that was countered with probably the brands reducing budget for obvious reasons, and for multiple reasons probably. So yeah, that's a good assessment of sort of how the quarantine has affected us in mobile. So every year we go into the year, this is before we talk about iOS 14 and changes, what anything particular you're looking forward to in 2020? I will just comment that I think, you know, with Eugenia, with your new company, the the power of the fintech financial space and reaching all corners of types of folks is super interesting. I think we're at a maturity level in the mobile space that can be really effective, and that's been proven. But what are you two looking forward to in 2020 for mobile?
I think the more immediate focus on engagement, retention. A lot of the focus for a lot of growth teams and acquisition teams were acquisition. And I think now, especially with, the iOS 14 changes, that you're now seeing more desire to really lean in on the retention aspect of it. How are folks communicating with their customers? What messaging, what value, what opportunities are there to build that relationship, continue to build that trust, and really driving and leaning in on loyal customers and having them help you with your acquisition, be advocates for the brand, help refer and bring in more users, or hopefully organically, and less impact or effect on the acquisition paid side.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah, can't agree more. I think I'm looking forward to a lot more creativity in the market, for sure, and generally from product and marketers. I think we'll need to be more product focused when it comes to new user acquisition. That's pretty much will be main focus for the year. Like there are like 3 levers generally how to acquire users. It's like you paid, your addiction, and then content and virality. So I think all companies, I personally advise, just look through those 2 lenses and try to invest into those areas as applicable to your product. Like I'm in fintech right now. Historically, people say, oh, that's like so not social, like what virality you can do there, but I believe we can, because we have a community-driven financial service, and it depends how you drive insights about your users, your promoters, your advocates, and trying to build those loops in product. So while there was a lot of already those trends before, I'm looking forward that a lot of more teams will start challenging themselves outside of paid, and paid will become also more creative and more integrated within the overall funnel.
Yeah, excellent points. And I reflect back on, 2011, when I first started in the mobile space. We went through this cycle of cheap installs, right? Because, boy, that seems like such a long time ago. We were babies in mobile. So driving CPIs and cheap installs. Then we kind of matured and looked at down funnel LTV and started optimizing. Everyone did. We, on the media channel side and on the app side, CPA. Now you're talking about product, and now you're talking about, okay, we've got the learnings from how to drive installs and how to really look at LTV funnels, but how can the product help drive the next sort of cycle, I guess, in mobile? And that's a really important thing. Creative will be part of that, and then contextual, which we can talk about in a little bit. But before we do that, iOS 14, I know Jonathan he was going to join, and I'll speak for him. He was speaking, kind of leveling up a little bit about what's happening, with GDPR and CCPA, and boy, this has been a really interesting year in that regard. And that's kind of that's the undercurrent, right, of what's going on with iOS 14 and with Apple. So briefly, one of the questions is, I wanted to ask, the polls are not working, but if we did, I've heard this so many times, what % of people are going to opt in to the pop-up? 5%, 10%, 20%. Maybe we could start with that and have, just speak to privacy in general. iOS 14, what is your prediction on? That's a broad question because it's a lot of different categories, but what do you think people will do? How many people will opt in for this? Either one of you can go first.
Yeah, I think numbers that that I've been seeing is, 20% on average. I think to increase that, a lot of brands will need to get really creative and smart about, opt-in and permissioning and how to ask that question at the right time with the best
Yeah.
messaging. But ultimately, privacy concerns, it's not going away. And from a consumer standpoint, it's important. People should know where, what data is being collected, how it's being used. Do they have access to it? Are people selling it, and where, et cetera. So I think from a consumer standpoint, it is important. And I think we should also keep that in mind, because they do have a right to their data. I know, if the product is free, you are the product. But data is important, data ownership is important, and you'll continue to see those conversations. So I do want to put that in perspective. From a marketing side, obviously, it makes things a little bit more challenging. You lose the precision, personalization, in some cases, especially for paid ads. But I think there is a balance, and again, utilizing this opportunity to be forthright and make sure that you are doing right by the consumer, and putting them first, and again, communicating and looking at ways that there could be a more symbiotic relationship.
Mm-hmm. It's fair.
Yeah, because ultimately we've seen that, the data can be used for good and bad, right? We've seen ourselves and experienced it in recent years. I think before you start thinking, the pop-up permissions, is just ask yourself how you will use it, why will you use it, for which use cases, or just look at holistically, is because I think you can push and 20%, and then you can push it incrementally potentially to 30%, but then what, right? Majority of users you will have not trackable. So I would advise companies to develop some system of measurement that they will be comfortable with, given the current constraints, like implementing SKAd network, or asking this pop-up to maybe extrapolate some value from those users and so on. But I would not ask your teams to really 100% focus on that, because then you will see a lot of innovation coming from teams who are thinking now how to do different type of acquisition, how to drive incrementality and so on, and you will be focused on optimizing pop-up. So, just really, again, would advise to put a large investment in your company for product teams to think about growth. At the same time, think about paid as a product as well, right?
Yeah, good. So on that note, and segueing in, how and Eugenia, I know with Smule, you were on the paid UA team, and now you have a bit of a broader role, and Gozi too on the paid side. How prepared do you think, have you talked to many people? How prepared are, let's say, the MMPs? How prepared are the channels, that's Facebook included, DSPs like us, other networks? How do you feel like the state of the union is on the media channel side? And then we could talk about how prepared might the marketer be. But how do you feel like how are we doing?
Yeah. And I, I still I manage paid right now and managed before, and I think the networks are still figuring it out, and I think we as marketers, my at least position was, I was waiting to see how big guys will figure it out, rather than trying to figure out solutions. And it seems like it's happening, right? I think Facebook came across, already putting some solutions ahead. MMPs were in shock, and now they're kind of trying to find their place, how they still drive value, for their clients. So I think we're getting there, but I think we'll see some dip we'll see some dip once it's going to be introduced, and then we'll start collectively figuring it out a new way forward.
Yeah.
And I agree. And I also think that, there's some businesses that aren't going to be as impacted as others. And I think it's an opportunity to lean into and leverage channels that are not IDFA dependent. Your organic channels, leveraging first party data, whether it's emails or texts or unique identifiers that are available through your MarTech or CRM systems and what have you, and also an opportunity to again leverage those organic channels, organic search, email, user generated content, influencers, social, as well as offline. I am starting to see a lot more direct mail, events, digital. Retail, in-store, out-of-home, QR codes, I think are going to be coming back. So I think it's an opportunity for a lot of brands and marketers to be a little bit more creative and maybe, hone in on other more traditional platforms and less so, kind of programmatic and paid ecosystem.
Got it. Good stuff. So I want to pause. I'm not seeing it on my screen, but I know we have people listening. So I want to encourage folks to jump in with any questions into the chat. We've got some more teed up, but we would love to hear from you. Got a lot of experience here on the call. So if it's Ask Me Anything, it doesn't have to be along the lines of anything we've talked about so far, or it can be pretty much Ask Me Anything. So please jump in on that. In the meantime, we will continue. So I want to make sure we covered on IDFA. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up on the IDFA front? Or I know every panel that's out there talks about this. I think we've covered it, unless you want to add anything, or we want to move on.
I also want to add, I'm also hearing that folks are going to be leveraging a lot more web to app interactivity and experiences as well. And web, there's some, some stuff around, cookies and deprecation there, but, there's still opportunity to leverage multiple channels towards, at least for those that it's relevant for, app installs.
Yeah, we're actually testing that out a little bit as well. So that could be a really interesting 2021, box to check and see how that works out for everyone, the web to app. So interesting. So I want to segue just another poll question we were going to take. Raise your hand, I guess, yes or no, although we don't know, is will Google follow suit with the Google Ad ID? Do we think that that'll be deprecated? And if so, when do you think that's going to happen? What have you heard? Or what's your premonition?
I think they might follow suit. Usually they do, and I think they have even more opportunities because they have overall ecosystems. So they will have a very competitive advantage. Apple doesn't have a strong advertising platform. Like, of course, Apple Search is great and it's a great addition to your portfolio, but it's not the scale that Google has. So I already see, I think their iOS 14 solution is also already, they are forward thinking about their overall, ecosystem, on the Firebase and so on. So I think, we discussed before this call that there will be a lot of consolidation, and it might be also driven by Google as well, that they're so consolidated and in control of a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, they have to answer, they have to have an answer, but Google is in the ad business. It's not going to be so forceful that it's going to impact, their earnings or revenue. So I definitely do think that they will have some kind of answer, but I don't think it'll be to the extent of Apple's solution.
And do we think that'll be this year, or how soon will they follow? Guesstimate, right? We don't know.
I mean, previously, I think with IDFA, they introduced it maybe like 2 years after something. I don't remember, but around that, right? So potential is similar.
Yeah.
Timeline.
Yeah,
So
they might get more business right now into Android, right? Also, like generally. So
yeah, you know what? That's not a bad point at all. They may be sitting on the sidelines and taking short-term advantage. Is kind of what we're saying. So on the monetization side, with maybe you could talk a little bit about this. I know with Gozi, you and I talked about your app and how you're monetizing. Different than, let's say, gaming, which is I'm very familiar with. And then for Eugenia, how you're monetizing. But does this change with Apple? How does it affect, or does it affect? I know, Eugenia, you're very involved with the product side too. How does it affect, or will it affect how you will monetize your app and your business going forward?
Yeah, I think, I guess like we'll need to make maybe the products more affordable, so more people will pay, for them, instead of focusing a lot on whales, because you won't be able to optimize as effectively to those whales. So when you think about your monetization portfolio, you might want to introduce more freemium experiences so more people come to your app just organically, and then some percentage of them will monetize. So I would say I foresee maybe some kind of expansion of services that people provide and make it more affordable to acquire more people. Like we had like pretty expensive subscription model at Smule. And I would assume that, those subscription prices might need to drop,
Yeah. Got it. Anything to add on that, Gozi?
So our Overtime app is, free to use, and we don't monetize with the app, so not quite affecting us the same way.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, there's all kinds of different segments in the app space in terms of how folks are monetizing. And it's yeah, I was listening to some folks this week about, there is quite a panic, I guess, if that's the word, or there was last summer about IDFA, but I think things have sort of, turned to what we'll call a solution-based approach. So, we're of a mind, me personally, that the iOS user is quite valuable. And, it's not like the marketing budgets are just going to turn off. The spigot's not going to turn off. The rules are going to change. So I liked hearing from folks in our space saying, let's all look at it as a solution-based problem. Let's attack it that way. And I think that kind of leads into some discussion that I want to have around contextual targeting. But before that, we do have one quick question from the listener. Let me see if I read this right. Since Google is more revenue driven than Apple, it's a fair statement, at least from ad revenue, to be specific, will there ever be an agreed upon standard for the industry that Google and Apple can both adhere to? That's the question. So in other words, I think what the question is really leaning towards is they have differing objectives, high level. Obviously, Apple's a hardware company, mostly. So yeah, maybe that's a good question. Will they ever come to terms on what's the right thing? Anybody have an answer on that?
I mean, I think Apple, as the listener said, they kind of, I think for them, this decision is kind of revenue focused because they're hardware focused, and, security and safety is part of their brand. And that's why people buy iPhone, right? So they optimize into iPhone revenue generally, right? So in that way, I believe there will be always a challenge in the status quo, while Google, for them, they are ad revenue heavy, right? So I predict they not going to be just shaking hands, but Apple will be always pushing forward, and then Google answering, solution.
I agree. I mean, Apple's play and positioning and messaging is, the privacy, and that is a big part of that. But also, it's a play for them to monetize and build their own advertising ecosystem. And so, they're still going to be competing with the Facebooks and the Googles.
Yeah, yeah. Time will tell. One other question, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, monetization. We don't have anyone on the panel that is directly with, an app that is monetized with ads in, ads in the app. We do work with several many clients in this category. What's your advice on that? This is I don't want to say scary, that's not the right word. This is a tumultuous time for apps that are monetizing with ads. Maybe based on your background and the jobs you've had in the past, any advice on if you were director of UA for one of those apps?
Having a lot of conversations with partners, both on at Google, Apple, if you're integrating other app and publisher SDKs into your product as well, making sure it's going to take a team effort, essentially. So, having those conversations with all the stakeholders and trying to figure out a solution that's going to work best for the business.
Yeah, I think it's just the partners that you choose, right? Like what confidence you have with them, because I think you as an app developer, game developer, I don't think you will figure out necessarily. It's kind of like all the ad networks need to unite and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough question. I agree, that's solution based, right? Picking your partner that you can work together with, and this is something we advocate with at Aarki, is let's work together to navigate this, because there's a lot of unknowns on both sides of the fence. Well, three sides of the fence: attribution side, the media channel side, whether you're a DSP, a network, or a walled garden, and then on the marketer side. So because there's so many unknowns, it's working together and collaborating on it and approaching it as a solution, I think, is the only way to go. So it'll be interesting. It'll be fun to do this again in, say, September. All our questions will be answered. What percentage did people opt in? We'll kind of get that clarity by then. So these panels in the fall should be even more interesting. We've all been sort of guessing for the last 3 or 4 or 5 months. So I want to turn just really quickly, because of all this, to contextual. And obviously with Aarki, we are a DSP, so we're looking at device signals, we're looking at IDFAs, and that's going to change. I think this is a super interesting time. What Apple's doing is a forcing function, right? To force us to think of other ways to target. And if you go back 10 years, it's not terribly unexpected, because we, again, at the beginning, I was saying we focused on cheap installs and we looked at LTV. We were understanding how to optimize, and marketers were understanding how to manage the funnel to an LTV model. I was talking with a marketer this past fall and winter around this notion of, well, could this be good? Because if I have an app that's very particularly has been focused on a particular demographic, maybe it's a male 18 to 34, if you will, then in the business we've all just been trying to find lookalikes, if you will. That's a word we use. But what if we could find a new audience for them using some contextual prowess, and find a whole set of new users that we didn't know would actually be very engaged with their app? So that's a big, long question, but contextual is going to become really important. So how do we do that in mobile? What are your thoughts there?
I think since it will be a new level field, right? Like all of a sudden you won't be able to find those like male 35, right? So all the user will become the same almost for you. I mean, you still will be able to optimize, right? But I think it's an interesting topic where you like your ad creative strategy needs to be contextual and targeted. You know, before, you know, I would say like, like all the Facebooks and Googles optimized towards like the best creative, so you knew what creatives work. But now, per what you said, yeah, why don't you will need to go back and explore maybe targeting certain ethnicities, you know, or you know, certain demographics of females versus males and so on. But creative will become crucial here. I think creatives which will drive that contextual nature and optimization.
And as personalized as it can be given the contextual environment.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And it's also like your channel strategy. I agree that, you know, you would why not to go offline, because probably the performance might be similar even, you know, like and so on.
Yeah, interesting.
And with that, you know, I think we'll continue to see more folks working with influencers and partnerships, and you know, different partners, and you know, you can try to, you know, make an assessment of who those users are and find folks that you think are aligned with those specific users, and with your product, with your brand, and so I think leveraging other, you know, real life lookalikes essentially will be an interesting and an area I think more folks will lean into.
Yep, and that was kind of my last subject or question, and we talked about this, Gozi, when we prepped, is this, you know, Gen Z and what channels are up and coming, and what does that mix look like? You mentioned influencers. There's obviously, you know, TikTok and you know, several others. But how are you? Because Overtime is a, you know, is a Gen Z app, primarily sports content, rivaling like Bleacher Report, I think you said, or ESPN. Anyone who's consuming sports content. How are you looking at 2021 and from a channel mix?
Yeah, we are meeting our audience where they are, and so that is TikTok, that's Snapchat, and from both the paid and organic you know, angle as well. You know, we have, you know, over 1 billion views a month on our content, as well as, you know, on social channels. I think we are the only media brand that's had over 1 billion views on TikTok. And so, you know, leveraging, you know, organic channels, organic content, as well as, you know, really having a focus on community. You know, we, as important as acquisition is, you know, utilizing the product as a growth channel, trying to figure out ways that we can enhance the experience, engineer virality through the product, as well as servicing and engaging our audience, and really leaning on the community, and looking at ways, again, that we can activate them as evangelists, and you know, help them to help us continue to find more users like themselves.
Yeah, a real life lookalike. I like that. So
really
question,
help them to help you. I really like it. You know, kind of like with Gen Z especially, people don't want to talk about your product, they want to talk about themselves, so just help them to talk about themselves.
That's very interesting. Yeah, for sure. And a question from a listener viewer here. So with influencer marketing, I mean, I might suggest, you know, that channel, if you will, is less mature than other mobile channels. How would you, maybe Gozi, what's your advice to the audience? How do you research an influencer channel or agency? Yeah, any best practices there that you could offer?
Yeah, it really depends on, you know, how much scale you're trying to achieve and what your budgets look like. I think it's best to kind of start small and have one-on-one engagements. And that's, again, looking at who is following your social platforms, who is engaging, who is talking about the things that your audience talks about, who would be a great again, lookalike to the audience that you're trying to engage and capture. And then if you're looking to scale and scale quickly, there are a ton of agencies that you can utilize that will do the work for you. I think that influencers are resource intensive. It's not consistent. Some campaigns do well and better than others. And so, you can take some of that, work out of the equation for you and leverage agencies who have those existing relationships. They work with thousands of influencers and you can run campaigns, more streamlined campaigns on a CPI basis, CPE, et cetera. So it really depends on the internal resourcing you have. If you have someone dedicated or the internal resources to tackle the channel on your own, that's great. If you want to outsource that and just have the agency do a lot of the legwork and have the budget to scale and scale quickly, I recommend going that route. But it's really kind of getting your feet wet and just trying to figure out if it's even a good channel, if it's a channel that could be scalable for your business, and kind of going from there.
Jeannie, are you using either individual influencers or agencies for Earnin yet?
Yeah, we're actually looking into it right now, working on it right now.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe that for fintech industry generally, influencers can be good because the main problem that we're trying to solve is trust.
Yeah.
So not necessarily you need to look through it through performance lenses, but also building that credibility and how you can measure it. So in that sense, that's why I want to focus on those. And I would advise, to definitely work with established agencies, unless you are, a makeup brand, because I've seen those guys actually build it very scalable. They can build a team internal around it and so on. So it depends on your brand. I would also encourage to look into something I want to explore, channels that are not as well known for influencers right now, like Twitch and so on. It depends on your audience, right? And at the end of the day, you will be measuring incrementality. So it's good to focus on the targeting and where your audience can be.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point that you said earlier. The right influencer can provide a lot of equity for your brand and trust. And that's a very important voice for you, but tricky, right, to find the right one. So I'm not in the influencer space, but I know that it's an important one and probably not as easy to navigate perhaps as some other channels because it's very fragmented. So thanks for that. One last question. So on the creative side, we mentioned earlier, it will become ultimately even more important than it was in the last year or two. At Aarki, we definitely take this approach. We do tons of creative iteration and we never let anything sit stagnant in the market because saturation can happen quite quickly. Any advice that you've learned in this, either, main channels like a Facebook or paid channels, mobile networks, or others? What is your advice on iterating creatives? How often and how important is it?
I think you really need to build a good pipeline and process around it, from internal, kind of having a scalable process internally, but also outsourcing externally for agencies, like performance-driven agencies that know how to do it, and they will be solving for it. That we're entering this year, and I would definitely find a way how you can have a templatized approach of something that is working, I'm a huge fan of UGC, and like I'm kind of coming from SMUL, but then earning also kind of started reaching out to our community to record some ads for us, right? So I love UGC approach because it gives you scale, and I believe a lot of brands can figure it out, while your agencies can figure out more like edgy things, more creative things. So kind of balancing those two approaches.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we've kind of figure out like the best process cadence. There are always going to be evergreen content that you're on, and then trying to figure out how often you introduce new ones, because sometimes the evergreen historic ads will continue to beat any new ones that you introduce. So still trying to figure that out, but I definitely agree with UGC. I think specifically for the Gen Z audience, having content ads that are authentic, that look authentic, that are less stylized and slick and heavily produced, tend to do well for at least for us. And that's sponsored content, that's influencers, that's working with different partners to leverage their creatives. And so I think for us, staying away from static banner ads and really leading into video. Video does very well, and it used to be that video was just top of the funnel, just awareness opportunities, but really finding that it is doing well for us in terms of lower funnel conversion actions.
Yeah, it's a natural maturation of our industry. I keep talking about this cycle, but I used to be in the television business on the ad side, and creative was king. Well, clearly the targeting wasn't quite as obviously granular as it is in mobile, but we're catching up with that, right? And especially with the proliferation of full screen video, like you're mentioning, yeah, it's going to be a major point going forward on the creative side to drive the best results and contextual relevance. Yeah, so I'm getting a note that we are out of time, 45 minutes. Any other last questions or last questions from the group? See if anything pops up, but any other, while we're waiting, if there's none, any last comments from you two? Thanks for joining. Anything else you want to add?
I have one comment, a selfish comment. I'm hiring like crazy right now on the growth team. So if you know someone or yourself, a great growth marketer, product person, life cycle, please DM me.
Yeah, great. Gozi, anything else or?
And for me, I think, listen, we didn't have all the bells and whistles that we do now. Years ago, decades ago, people that were in advertising and marketing, they were able to be successful. And I think, there's going to always be challenges. I think we'll navigate it as a community, and we'll adjust and we'll be just fine.
I like that. That's the solution approach, right?
We always figure it out.
We always figure it out. We will. Okay, I think that wraps it up. Gosh, thanks you guys. Girl power. It's fun to do this with you, and appreciate your time. Thanks for providing your expertise. Great experience from both of you. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm sure it'll be available to listen back on later.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you. All right.
Yes,
yep, thank
you.
Thank you, Gozi, Eugenia, and Kim. We really appreciated hearing from all of you. And it has been recorded, so there will be a playback feature on this. But thank you guys so much for joining us and supporting Mobile Growth Summit. Thanks to all of our sponsors that really made this happen today. We are so appreciative of all of you. So
thank you.
You all have a wonderful evening and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.